Good afternoon and welcome to the May version of Inside Redesign. We're here at ESDAC, well, virtual ESDAC, all from our homes. Dr. Steve Wyckoff, our host, is with us. And today our guest, Tammy Mitchell from KSDE. We are excited to have her with us. And again, Miss Katie Perez, and a great, wonderful ESDAC employee with us. And these two do a lot of work in the redesign of schools, and we are delighted to have them today. So I'm going to kick this over to Dr. Wyckoff and let him get going. So,
Tammy, great to have you on today. It's good to see you since we don't see you face to face anymore.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I'm excited for this opportunity.
Great. So just kind of give us the big picture look at what's gone on with redesign since spring break. Kind of give us an update of the world from Tammy's point of view.
Sure. Yeah. You know, our world has changed, hasn't it? Just when we thought we had this really great project timeline and our calendar set for the spring, it just kind of all, life happened and everything changed for everyone. But we have been really excited to continue the redesign work. Jay Scott, my colleague, and I have each been hosting redesign office hours 2 times a week. Last week we had some guest speakers on the elementary redesign check-in. We had someone talk about blended learning and virtual learning from Ed Elements. Tomorrow we have Jane Groff on about family engagement. And next week, we've got Susan Maynor, who's the instructional coach from Epic Elementary in Liberty, Missouri, who's going to join us to talk about project-based learning and how Epic Elementary has been continuing learning throughout these last few weeks. So we've been trying to bring in some volunteer speakers. It's been fun because we've had all of the cohorts participate. We just put it out there for any redesign elementary school who wanted to join in. And so the conversations have been really good between Mercury, Gemini 1, Gemini 2, and even Apollo schools joining in. Some of you may know, and some of you might be Apollo schools, they kind of got gypped out of their entire year of regional training and planning. But what we're hearing from them, many of them, is that through continuous learning, they were able to continue to prototype and test some of the elements that they want in their redesign plan. And we are working with them to figure out who wants to present their launch plan yet this spring and who is going to wait until the fall. So we'll be personalizing that support for all of those schools so that by the end of the fall semester, December 2020, I'm sure they will all be ready to launch their redesign plans. So that's been super fun. We did push back the Apollo 2 application period to July 1. Our original deadline was at the 1st of April, and we figured that while schools were trying to figure out how to implement continuous learning, maybe they wouldn't be applying for Apollo 2. We were a little bit wrong on some of that because we had several schools contacting us saying, we're still getting our application in. But we can dust off that project timeline from our first year with the Mercury schools and bring our Apollo 2 schools on. So those are the updates from those cohorts. And then like every other person in the entire United States that plans professional development, right now we are figuring out how to provide a blended model of training for regional trainings so that next year, if we can't meet in large groups, or if we have to close school buildings again, or we end up with the blizzard of a lifetime, or whoever knows what happens in Kansas, we can continue some of that redesign training in a virtual model. So lots of work to be done. I'm sure that you all are flipping a lot of your trainings too. So
yeah, in fact, Tammy, we have a conference that we're holding tomorrow, and I think our enrollment passed 500, didn't it, Dr. Cook?
We're getting closer to 600, and we'll
Yeah.
probably hit a 700 before the end of, well, the end of tonight. We're working with a BOCES out in New York that wants to put another 100 people in. So we're trying to get that ironed out. But yes, it's going to be a nice, big virtual conference.
It's amazing what you can learn to do in a short period of time.
Yes, it is. That's impressive. Those are some pretty big numbers. That's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, we're
Good
really
for you
pleased
guys.
with that. So, Tammy, as schools now, Mike and I spend most of our time with superintendents. And as we've been talking over the last week and a half, probably, their mindset is totally on August at this point, almost exclusively. But what we're hearing from them is, what's August going to look like? And the thing that we're hearing most often, plan for the worst, hope for the best. But it seems, Mike and I have talked about this, it seems to us that what a great time to be thinking about redesign, and especially focusing on the redesign principles, because if you do that, you're ahead of the game. If you don't do that, if you try to just continue in a very traditional way, at some point you're still going to have to redesign. So why not take advantage? What are you telling people about August?
Well, you know, it's just so fun because we've had districts contact Jay and I and say, talk to us about redesign, because, and they're districts that, you know, 6 months ago wouldn't have considered it at all. And what we're finding is that they are learning so much through continuous learning and the things that they've put in place. And they were able to flip that in a week, that taking an entire year to plan their redesign seems easy now, right? So there was a time when that 1 year plan year seemed, oh my gosh, that's too fast. Well, now districts are like, well, we flipped what we did in a week, having a year to really build sustainability and language and to be able to prototype and test these elements before having to implement them seems like a luxury. So I think that that's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be interesting. And you know, what we're also seeing is that I'm sure that there isn't an elementary teacher in the entire state that wouldn't agree with, you know, if you want continuous learning or virtual learning to work, and if it really needs to work, we can't do it without family and community engagement. And so that's one of the redesign principles that we're seeing schools, redesign and not redesign, engage their communities and their families in completely different ways. We've seen schools take more of a personalized approach. I know that they're trying to build in some type of real world experiences or activities, and those student success skills, social emotional learning. Schools are embedding all of those into their continuous learning plans, or at least they're trying to figure out how to do that. Those are the 4 redesign principles. And so jumping into redesign would teach buildings, staff members how to use design thinking, how to be really intentional about the things that they select, and how to use the 4 disciplines of execution to execute those things well, and to collect data on the elements that they're doing. So call it redesign, call it whatever you want to. The 4 redesign principles are essential, and even more essential as we're looking towards the future. The other thing too is I'm hearing a lot of schools say, you know, we've done all of this through continuous learning. When we start school in August, we don't want it to look the same. We're beyond the traditional. We're ready to innovate.
Yeah, you know, Tammy, we've actually had friends or superintendents tell us they've gotten some phone calls from parents that have said, when we come, if and when we come back to school, does our child have to come all day, every day? And we're starting to get people, they say, we don't want to homeschool, but we want the ability to work at home some, you know, but we want them to be enrolled in the public school. Are you hearing that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We're hearing a lot of, you know, the schools that have really engaged their families, families are loving that kind of engagement. They don't want to go back to the way it was. And so I think that we're on the leading edge of something, a movement that's really, really different. It's different than we imagined. So yeah, I don't think people really want to go back to the status quo normal. I mean, they would like for their children to go back to school, certainly, but they want those experiences to be more personalized for their students.
So Tammy, you use the word engaged. And one of the discussions we've had with superintendents, that they're reporting they're having some communication that parents are asking, how do you get kids to do this work at school? And you're smiling. You've probably heard that. So I'm going to share a screen with you. And we've been talking to schools about this. This is work from Phil Slechte. And you're too young to know Phil, but Phil was a keynote at the KSDE conference a couple of times. But the more we've talked, the 5 levels of engagement, the kids working at home who are authentically engaged, they're the ones that are really doing some good stuff. We have some reports from parents whose kids are rebellious right now. We've got all these levels. How do we make sure that our kids are authentically engaged? What do you think the secret is to being authentically engaged?
Well, I'm going to be really careful with what I say here, because the times that we are in right now are really different. Families are under a tremendous amount of pressure and stress. You figure every single parent in our state right now is either working from home and trying to do continuous learning with their children, or they're out of a job and they're trying to figure out how to pay their bills while they're trying to support their children through continuous learning. Or maybe they're doctors or nurses or EMTs. They're on the front line of this COVID-19 pandemic, and that brings with it all of its other challenges as well. So I would say that, right now, parents need to try to keep their kids engaged. But if they're resistant or rebellious or upset, we have to understand that, especially at the elementary level, we have rocked their world. I mean, we've got children, my own children, for example, when they were little, they would have been upset if I didn't have the right breakfast cereal for them in the morning, right? And what we're doing to little kids now is we've totally disrupted everything. They're not seeing their teachers on a regular basis. They're not playing with their friends. There's a lot of fear and worry in the air. Even they're overhearing news. They're overhearing adults speak. So I guess, I would like to have this conversation about student engagement at a different time, because right now I just don't feel like we can pressure little kids into being engaged under the current circumstances.
I'm going to give you just a little different take on it that
Okay.
Dr. Cook and I have talked a lot about. We're starting to believe that the authentic engagement that's the point of convergence of the 5 R's. That when they have a good relationship with people, with school, they, the culture is responsive, that they get to work on stuff that's meaningful to them, that they see relevance in it. They work hard because they're interested in it. So we think it might be the convergence of the 5 R's. What do you think?
I like that idea. I really do, because we know that little kids can't learn outside of a loving, caring relationship. So those relationships, rigor at the elementary level, meaning, is it important learning? Can they make a connection as to why they would be learning it? And just giving them just a ton of voice and choice as far as their areas of interest, how they want to show learning. I like what you're saying there, that authentic engagement would be where all of the R's come together in that kind of sweet spot.
Yeah, you talk about voice and choice. One of the teachers we do a lot of work with is Mike Cargill, and he's at Stafford High School. But he has been amazed. He has created badges around all of the science content. And the kids are working on those independently, and he's done an amazing job. But he said just the difference in getting to choose when you work on something and how you get to demonstrate your mastery of it has made a phenomenal difference in the work the kids do. Just that piece, that one little piece of voice and choice.
Right. And, you know, I think sometimes people think that elementary students, especially kindergarten, first and second, that they're too little to have voice and choice. And that is absolutely not true. They are totally capable of making some really good choices for themselves as far as how they want to learn, what they want to learn. So, yeah, I would say that voice and choice is super critical at every level.
Yeah. Katie, did you have any questions for Tammy?
No, this has been great. Great conversation. Okay. I agree with so much of this. I think that the hardest thing about being a parent and an educator right now is the guilt that comes into play over what my kid is doing and not doing. And Steve, the slides the definitions you've shared there are just spot on with what we're experiencing right now. Totally retreatism is where my kiddo is living right now. Maybe a little bit of that compliance level if she thinks that Mr. Erickson might find out she hasn't done anything. Yeah. So that passive compliance, but that's only if she sees him on announcements and that reminder of, oh, I'm supposed to work. So it is just compliance, but just a lot of disengagement unless it's something that she wants to learn. Yeah. What has been fascinating to me is watching her natural rhythm. And I think that's something I've talked to a lot of parents about lately, just in my circle of friends, is that our kids all have these really unique rhythms that they thrive best under. And so for our home, it's been realizing that, man, if she could go to school from 10 to 3, she'd be a much happier kid. That she's suffered from sleep disorders her whole life. But man, if she can wake up at 9:30 and get going, totally different human. And so it's just raised so many questions that I'm talking to my redesign teams about. How are you going to take the individual needs of your kids into consideration as you return to whatever new normal will mean for your district?
Yeah. You know, one of my sons, and I'd share this with our leadership team. One of my sons in Kansas City, one of my granddaughters is up at 7 o'clock in the morning and dives right into her work. And they're getting their work about a week at a time. By when she works mornings only, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. By Wednesday at noon, she's got all of her work done for the week. She loves her schoolwork, and she loves the freedom of doing other stuff, you know, the other afternoons and the full days on Thursday, Friday. But one of my grandsons, he starts his at 7 at night, and he would be passive compliant. But because of my daughter-in-law, he's pretty much ritualistically compliant. She's going to make sure he does his work, but it's just different kids. Mm-hmm. You know, same family. Everything else is the same. Mm-hmm. Dr. Cook, any questions or comments?
No, I just was thinking, listening to all this, I totally agree with what's being said. And that's couldn't agree more with you, Tammy, on the stress that we're seeing in the families right now. I have 5 children, and all of them have little ones who either were preschool or at the daycare or whatever. And, you know, that created, and there's some educators in the family. So it's all about those routines and that rhythm that Katie mentions, and how that's been disrupted, and the angst that has occurred and continues to occur, create and occur. But all that being said, I've been also thinking a little bit about how does all of this tie into some of the work that's going on just recently started at the state level on shifting to competency-based learning. I know there's a committee that's looking at providing some guidelines along that area. Katie, you mentioned, and Tammy, you mentioned this personalized learning. Katie, I know that we've got some things going on there. You know far more about what you guys have planned to help our teachers. But everything around this pedagogy and shifting to this competency-based and how we've got to get back to some kind of accountability system in our learning versus the crisis learning we're in right now. Or we're going to have some gaps that we may already have some gaps that are occurring. And if we widen that gap and disparity among the have and have nots, we're gonna really create an issue. So anyway, that's kind of all that stuff rolling around up here, and it's just like a big mess. But this is a big mess anyway. But I'm wondering how all that redesign and all this is going to come together. So talk to us a little bit about that competency based and what you guys are thinking about that. And Katie, jump in here with personalized learning too, because I know you guys got some cool things ready for teachers.
Yeah, so this is relatively new. I mean, it's Wednesday, and our first meeting on this competency-based task force was Monday. So this was like super hot off the press. And that was also the day that I found out that I'm leading the pre-K through 2 task force. But, you know, because things just happen fast that way. But what is really interesting is that, you know, personalized learning has been one of the 4 redesign principles for 2 years now. It seems longer, and yet it seems like yesterday. But we've always said, okay, does personalized learning come first, or does competency-based learning come first, right? It's kind of the chicken or the egg. In order to really personalize the pace of learning, we have to be able to know which competencies students have mastered so that they can move at their pace, right? A faster pace, a deeper pace, a little bit slower pace. But we also know that having competencies doesn't necessarily make it personalized. So it really is the chicken and the egg, and they really are going to go together nicely. I'm happy to be working with a small group of KSDE folks, and then people from KU and some of our redesign schools to work on that pre-K through 2 work. But we've got grades, a task force on grades 3 through 5, 1 for middle school and 1 for high school. And our goal is to have something really nice to roll out to schools and districts by the middle of July, which means that there's a ton of work to be done. But I think every educator in our state knows how kind of complex it is, especially at the elementary level, when you have to know the ELA and the math and the science and the social studies and blah, 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 all of the standards, and they're not all in one place, and they're not all in one format. It is kind of, it's just all over. And so our goal is to pull all of that together for elementary teachers and figure out competencies rooted in the standards that are either essential competencies or extension competencies. And that's the work that we have just begun. So, but it's needed. And our teachers that are on these task force have been like, we have been waiting for this for 2 or 3 years now. We're really excited to start building it. This group will work on kind of a draft, and then in June we will put that draft out to teachers around the state for feedback and further development, because we want a lot of voices and a lot of eyes and ears engaged in what this will look like. And even when we roll it out in July, it will be safe enough to try. It's not going to be perfect. We kind of got over our perfectionism a long time ago, and it will be a continuous improvement. So it will support personalized learning. It will also provide the kind of rigor that we need in the future. If we have to step back and close buildings again, how can we ensure equitable, deep learning moving forward. The continuous learning plan has been phenomenal. It's been phenomenal work. It happened so fast. It wasn't intended to be a long-term fix. It was intended to help us get through this crisis time. So
And it did that well, by the way.
yes. So that's where we're at on that.
You know, Tammy, we're really interested in this whole competency discussion. And, you know, we were having a conversation with the superintendent, and he said, we need this whether we're back in school or not. We need the competencies, because he said, we give kids extra credit for bringing a box of Kleenexes that raises their grade. That has nothing to do with what they learn. Now, that may not be a bad thing, but don't equate that to learning. We need to make sure the kids are getting what they need academically.
Right.
And maybe you get more points if you can find hand gel versus Kleenexes. I don't know.
Yeah, you know,
there you go.
I've nailed one of those ingredients in the hand sanitizer. I'm working on the other one.
All right.
So,
See, now you broke my train of thought.
Sorry.
What's the relationship with it, as you look at that as leading that pre-K through 2 group? What's the relationship between the competencies and the state assessments? Are the state assessments those really important competencies?
Well, you know, another chicken and the egg puzzle, right? Yeah, we have state assessments currently. We also have interims, but we also are looking to the future. I mean, if there is some way to create a competency-based state assessment sometime down the road, I think that those conversations are starting to happen too. So I think that what we really want to do is we want to select the competencies that are important for our Kansas students, and then eventually figure out how to assess or measure those competencies in whatever format. So that's all I can say on that right now. But it's not that we're not making the state assessment the end all be all. We're not moving back to that.
Do you see the social studies state assessment that's going to be piloted next year? Do you see it as competency based, or really the little kids don't have to take it? So you may not be very familiar with that, but it appears, you know, I think that, my opinion, for whatever that's worth, the social studies people have done a great job with their standards. And, you know, they've narrowed them down, and they've moved away from the, you know, the Delta items. It's not states and capitals anymore. It appears to me to be really competency based. I don't know, Katie, jump in on that too. You're familiar. Go ahead, Tammy.
Well, I was just going to say, you would be correct in that I am not up to date on the social studies standards. However, I do share a cubicle wall with Don Gifford. And so therefore I get to overhear his conversations. Yeah, I think that Don would say that they are more competency based, and they certainly, at least at the elementary level, make a lot of sense. So it would be good if we could take that kind of a model and work that for ELA and math and science.
Yeah, and on top of that, it is a project-based approach in social studies, which just absolutely thrilled us. We don't tell Glenn Wiebe that, but we're thrilled.
I tell Glenn Wiebe that. Was I not supposed to?
What are you thinking, Katie, about that?
Yeah. I think one of the things that's been really interesting for me to consider, you know, coming from a PBL background, is that I've always considered assessment to be for learning rather than an assessment of learning. And I think that that's really what we mean when we're talking about personalized learning, is we're talking about any assessment that I give in my classroom should be used for me to make decisions as an educator about what kids need next, which is why state assessments rub so much against most of what I believe as an educator, because I'm giving it and I don't get the scores and I can't really do anything about it instructionally for my own kids. I have to use it to think about next year's kids. So I'm hoping that's something that we can shift away from as we continue these conversations, is that we're using those assessments for a completely different purpose than what we're maybe using them for now, which is something philosophically I think most of us in the classroom disagree with, right? And I think that's common belief in practice. I don't think I can think of a single educator that says, yes, state assessments give me tons of data that I love using as a teacher. It is more of a must do culmination type of thing. So I would love to see something that is more in line with what I'm hearing about the new social studies assessment. I also am not super up to speed with exactly how that's going to work or what it's going to look like. If Tammy shares a wall with Don Gifford, I share a wall with Glenn Wiebe. So, that's kind of, we are probably very similar in what we overhear in the office at that point.
So my condolences to both of you.
They're both amazing humans. We love both of
I-
them
Yes, they are.
dearly.
I know, I do. I'm just giving you a rough time. So, hey, something's going through my head. We pulled together that team that put together the continuous learning plan. Now we've pulled together a team that's going to look at competency-based learning, for lack of a better thing, future learning or whatever it's being called.
We have an internal name, but it is not it's not the name we're going to settle on for the public just
Okay.
yet.
Okay. So as this has all hit, and I think back to March 13th, and I think about Randy having meetings with us on Saturday and Sunday, and then every day, and if something needed changed, for instance, the food service. I watched the feds change something overnight, literally changed stuff overnight, wiped out tons of regulations and said, go do this. And they did it. We looked at, doing away with certain calendar things overnight. We redid the learning process in a week. Now we're looking at this. What I'm seeing is this rapid fire change process that's all been initiated by this sense of urgency. As we look at the fall and going forward, are we going to develop some processes and habits, maybe, just maybe, to change some of these long-term factory model processes that we've used in education to where maybe change won't take so long in education in the future? Maybe we can learn to pull people together and say, here's the problem, let's get it done by Thursday.
I think
I
we're
hope we
learning
can.
that we can do more than we ever thought, right? I think sometimes there's some bureaucracy and there are some protocols that get in the way of moving fast, and maybe we don't need those anymore. I do really think our team has said this, and I've heard schools say it, that using design thinking, the steps of design thinking has really changed how they've been able to approach adaptive challenges like these are. And so, I think we're building a statewide, a common language and a common process to approach these adaptive challenges in creative ways. And we are breaking down walls and barriers of collaboration. And we're doing that as much as we talk about having Zoom butt or being Zoomed or over Zoomed. I mean, just think of how easy it is now to collaborate with people from all around the state instantly this way. We don't have to drive 2 hours or 3 hours. We don't have to spend the night in a hotel. We don't have to eat out. We can pull the best thinking of the best people together instantly, talk about it, go our separate ways to do our work, and come back together. I really believe that we have broken the chains that have held us back before as far as collaborating. And I miss face-to-face meetings and face-to-face trainings. I do, but I also know that that really hindered our ability to collaborate. We couldn't get the best voices together at the same time because of the hindrances of travel. So yeah. I'm excited for all of the things that we've learned and the ways that we can move quickly if we need to.
Tammy, is the Federal Department of Education, are they being much more flexible now? I've heard almost nothing about the feds during this thing in terms of the Department of Ed, but are they loosening up a little and being more flexible?
I would doubt it. We haven't heard much from them. I'm pretty sure that a lot of them are furloughed or working from home or not working as well, and they're quarantined. So I wouldn't necessarily say no news is good news on that front, but you know, we can't predict what they're thinking usually.
Tammy, I'm going to shift a little bit because the discussion about project-based learning made me think of this. And I will tell you up front, I am not an expert on summit learning. I don't know enough to deserve an opinion, but people that I respect really like it. But I've heard several of them say it's really good, but it really doesn't replace project-based learning in its truest sense. And I've had several of them say that. We love it, but we need more.
Mm-hmm.
What's your take? You get to be out and talk to the schools that have been in redesign. What's your take on summit learning?
Yeah, so what I know about it is that it doesn't start until 4th grade. So we have very few elementary schools using it. We do have some. And what I know is that when 4th graders get into the content and the curriculum of summit learning, it is much more rigorous than what many of our Kansas schools are used to. So there is a pretty big gap. They need a lot of scaffolding at 4th grade to engage in the curriculum. And then I would say that from the summit trainings that I've attended, they never call their projects project-based learning. They call them content-related projects. And so those that are really purists on project-based learning would likely, very definitely would want more. Summit Learning doesn't say that it's project-based learning. They say it's content area projects. Okay. So I could see where that would be, you know, a very valid opinion, certainly.
Katie, jump in on that. You've had some experience.
I actually do not have any of my direct redesign schools using Summit, and so it isn't something that I have really, like you, Steve, I don't know that I have enough knowledge to have an opinion that should be voiced on a publicly recorded webinar.
Oh, that's never stopped me.
I will say, though, that the schools, like the middle schools and high schools that have used Summit Learning all along, what Jay and I are hearing is that this flip to continuous learning was so seamless that it was literally just the difference of where kids were accessing their curriculum. They have been very, very pleased with how easy this was, because they already had all of the hiccups and bugs worked out with their technology and their access.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that speaks more to our need to be using a variety of different platforms and ways to access learning in a classroom to begin with, no matter what they are. Mm-hmm. You know, one of the questions the other day from my daughter's school district was, how are you guys liking Seesaw? And my thought was, well, she's been using it all year, and so nothing changed. I mean, I didn't realize that was something new for other classrooms because she already knew how to access the platform. So she didn't have to learn a tool before she could start learning. And I think that that's huge in the fact that we are still, even under redesign ideas and processes, we're still really relying on the teacher as being the primary source of information and learning in a classroom. And we've got to get away from that. We've got to start helping our students learn how to learn rather than being students.
You know, I'm going to tell you just an interesting anecdote, because to me, this was really profound. I was speaking with one of our learning center directors who works with kids who have dropped out of school. And I was asking him, how's it going? How are the kids doing? And he said, the kids that we struggled with getting them to do anything before spring break we're still struggling with them getting it to do. But he said, interestingly, our kids that were actually doing work engaged, he said they're doing about twice as much work at home. And Mike and I had talked about it. That's fascinating. We need to know more about that. What is it about why they're getting to work at home? Because every one of those kids was a failure in the public schools, the traditional system. You know, by definition, they quit, and yet they're doing twice the work they were doing before. There's some interesting dynamics there.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Cook, any more questions from you? Or are we getting into your nap time?
Well, I was thinking that, but you know, I can take a nap with my eyes open. I do when I used to drive, so you know.
Yeah.
You know, it's the only time I can get a nap. So I don't know. The whole project-based learning, the whole engagement, you know, comes back to also how do we personalize it, and that helps us get to that level, you know, that next level. Because when it's interesting to me as my passion area, I'll dig in, and as we all do. Whether we're a little or a big, we will dig in. And anyway, I just think that personalization along with project-based learning and how we do that is going to be really, really a huge part of this. You know, we call them the 4 pillars redesign principles. Really, they're just great learning principles when you really get down to it. We got to probably, at some point, we'll stop using the word redesign. And it's just the way we do things. That's the way it ought to be. Anyway, Katie, I know you do a lot with the personalized learning thing. So anyway, I invite you to throw out some stuff on that.
Yeah.
I just always find it fascinating.
Well, we do, I don't know if this is the best time, but we do have an upcoming learning experience that our team is putting together for personalized learning that we have been working on. It was kind of those things that was supposed to be at a different date and we ended up moving it, and then it was supposed to be at another date and we ended up moving it again. And then now we're really kind of excited about why we put off this opportunity. So it's June. I have to look at my notes, y'all, because dates don't mean anything anymore. It's June 8th, 10th, and 12th. And so actually what we're going to do is it's a section of our consultant team. I would be joined with Robbie Elstrom, Renee Smith, Carmen Zeisler, and Ginger Lumen. And we're going to do kind of a 3 half-day session experience for personalized learning, where we really try to separate out the difference between personalized learning, individualization, I can't even say it, and differentiated instruction, and kind of help people see what that progression is to know where their entry point is. One of the things that Ginger and I talk about a lot in PBL is that there are gold standard models out there. There are things that say this is exactly what PBL should look like and be like. And as a real teacher in the trenches doing this on a daily basis, I don't have time for gold standard right away. I need to get there over time. And so maybe we need to remind teachers to go back and let's look at DI and let's look at what that is and how are you currently doing that to ramp it up to personalized learning. Let's look at PBL and where does PBL fit? For some people, PBL fits before personalized learning, like it's a step before it. Some people think that PBL is a step after personalized learning. And so we're going to kind of try to outline all of that experiential kind of way. So we're challenging people to spend a week with us where they are designing a personalized learning experience for their classrooms, be that virtual or be that in person. And we're going to walk with people every step of the way. It's been really interesting to hear our team talk about how can we model this in a virtual setting. So there's gonna be a lot of choice, a lot of different sessions, a lot of different opportunities for people to pick and choose what it is they need on this topic and then go straight and get that, whether they are staying with us for part of that time, or they're saying, okay, this is great. I'm going to go over here and investigate something on my own for 30 minutes and then rejoin the group. We think we've got this really hammered out to be an amazing experience. So we're excited for people to come join us that week. So hopefully we can get that message out to people and they're willing to say, this is interesting. I'd like to learn something more about this. And I want to do that in a community. And that, to us, that's what personalized learning is saying, I'm interested in this over here, and I would like a community to work with that and develop something really awesome that is meaningful for me, but also contributes to a greater good. So that's kind of that's our hope. That's our plan.
Well,
Come join us.
Sounds exciting. Good job. That's awesome.
Hearing the members on that team putting that together, I know one thing, it will be fun.
It'll be fun. It'll be you get Robbie and Ginger and Renee in a room together, and you're going to get a lot of really fast talking deep information, right? So I guess I could probably be included in that group, but
yeah, I was gonna say.
Well, Tammy, any last thoughts or comments or observations, words of wisdom?
I think one of the biggest things that I've learned and I've heard other people comment on, and I'm going to go back to parent family engagement, because at the elementary level, none of this works if we don't have families engaged, right? And so I want to think about, instead of family engagement or parent engagement, let's talk about parent efficacy. How can we build parents' confidence so that they know how to work with their children at home? And I think what we're seeing is a different level of parent and family engagement, because parents can't physically come to the school building. I think a lot of times as educators, we host parent nights and then we get disappointed when people don't show up. And then we think, well, parents aren't engaged. Well, they are engaged in the life of their child. And so I think we're seeing some different opportunities to build parent and family efficacy, strengthening their skills to help their student at home. And maybe, again, through some virtual tools, we can engage them more completely, instead of thinking that they have to take off work to come to school, or they have to give up an evening at home to come to a school thing. And so I think that that's going to be a big shift moving forward too, is getting away from those old-fashioned ways of engaging parents and families and moving towards this parent efficacy piece. So more to come on that in the future.
Tammy, thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Cook, but great job as always. We always appreciate having you anytime you can come to SDAC or join us virtually, you are more than welcome.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I love coming out to Hutchinson to SDAC, and hopefully I can get in my state car again soon and come see you all.
Well,
I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. And Tammy, yes, thank you for joining us. Katie, thank you. Both of you always bring great insights to this conversation. And I just want to encourage all the school districts out there that are listening and have gone through this continuous learning plan and learned all the things you've learned, really seriously consider jumping into the redesign process. It is a very, very good process. It gets us to thinking, and it helps us to change. And more importantly, it helps us to really take a hard look at how do we ensure that each kid is successful. And that's what all that matters. So ladies, thank you so much. Tammy, thanks for taking your time out of your busy schedule at the State Department and doing the work you do. Greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. And Katie, I know you're just out there going crazy doing all the fun things you're doing. So
all the fun things. That's
thank you
right now.
again for joining us. To the crew, thanks for making all this possible. And thank you to everyone who joined us. And we look forward to having our next Inside Redesign in the middle of May coming up. So can't remember the dates. I can't remember anything anymore. So with that, we can sign off. Thank you.
Tammy. Katie, thank you.
Thank you.